Hello, hello, and welcome back to Bearing Birth, a birth story podcast highlighting the emotional impact of birth, the immediate postpartum period, and the years beyond. I'm Jordan, a doula specializing in postpartum support.
And I'm Sophie, a perinatal mental health therapist. Today we are sharing part one of a great conversation we had with Ryan, who is a father to a now 1-year-old daughter and husband to one of our previous guests, Cailley.
Cailley was part of our first before and after birth series. She came on when she was pregnant and then again after she gave birth to their daughter to share her experiences. Those 2 episodes were posted back in January, and we highly recommend going back to listen before or after you hear Ryan's side of things. And we just have one content warning for this episode, which is miscarriage or child loss.
This is a unique conversation in that we hear a birth story from the perspective of the non-birthing partner. In this first part of the conversation, Ryan shares with us how he and Cailley experienced a miscarriage early on in their first pregnancy, before their daughter was born. He describes how he and Cailley found support through counseling and how they determined their readiness to try again.
We really appreciate Ryan's openness and vulnerability in coming on and sharing so much about the pain and grief that comes with experiencing child loss. He also gave us his perspective on the best ways he could have been supported by friends or family. Ryan talks about how he and his wife honored the baby they lost and how this event impacted their communication and connection in a positive way.
There's a part in this episode where we talk about how miscarriage is this phenomenon experienced by so many people and parents out there, but that it is also still an isolating, painful, singular event experienced by the person. There is so much stigma, secrecy, and shame in talking about the deeply painful experience of miscarriage and child loss. I definitely noticed within myself that I was nervous about what questions were okay to ask Ryan, but overall I really appreciated how asking certain questions, like the one involving early loss statistics, opened up the conversation for some topics to be discussed, like how miscarriage statistics can actually be harmful or helpful to different people.
We wanted to provide a fact check on the most up-to-date statistics for first trimester miscarriage and realized there's quite a lot of conflicting information out there. Some sources we found say 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, while others say 1 in 10, so it's really confusing. Regardless of what the actual prevalence might be, the important thing is that miscarriage is a very difficult experience for the individual, and it's really important to seek out support if that feels right.
A huge thank you to Ryan for your openness and sharing how you processed miscarriage. We really hope this episode resonates with listeners who have experienced pregnancy loss and feel less isolated. If you are looking for support around miscarriage and child loss, we have included a bunch of resources in this episode's description on support groups, coping tools, and additional options.
And also, stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Ryan, where he shares his perspective on the birth of his daughter and how he supported Cailley and processed a roller coaster turn of events.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening.
A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
This is our first partner, non-birthing person on the podcast.
Yeah, on his own. So we'd love to hear your experience of your daughter's birth. Yeah, even though, your body didn't go through pregnancy and birth, I'm sure you went through a lot mentally and emotionally and with Cailley, your partner. So anything that you want to share about pregnancy, what the birth was like for you from your perspective, the first couple of weeks postpartum, and then your daughter's turning 1 in just a few days. So really anything about fatherhood so far too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'll start before the pregnancy, because for those who haven't heard my wife's story, we were pregnant before our daughter, which ended in a miscarriage. So that was difficult trying to jump in those waters again. And I think especially as the non-birthing partner, because my wife had a lot of reassurances during pregnancy that things were moving along. She could feel the child, her body was doing things, and I kind of didn't really have those assurances for a long time. So it was a little more hesitant, I'd say.
To get excited.
Part of it, I guess, to feel real in a way. Because I think as a trauma response, you don't want to get too excited too fast again. Your brain probably just wants to protect you from going through the pain again. But
of course.
And also medically, she had anterior placenta attachment. So she could feel it, when the baby was kicking, it was kicking into her body, but I couldn't really feel it on the outside as much. So
just another literal barrier to you experiencing this pregnancy.
Yeah, so it was pretty challenging. I mean, it was exciting, but also like a little hesitant to be excited because you don't want to go through that pain again. But
Yeah.
but also knowing like this is a separate experience, and regardless of the outcome, you don't want to like have one foot in and one foot out.
Yeah. From what I remember from Cailley sharing on her episode, she had mentioned that you were the one who organized counseling and for the two of you to work through that together and grieve. And I was just curious, what made you seek out counseling or know that that was something that could help the two of you?
Yeah, I'm a very staunch believer in therapy. For all those Portlanders out there, I do tend to get the seasonal affective disorder. So I know come the winter months, like there are days where I'm feeling a little more down than others, and there are ways to help. So I've been in and out of therapy for a few years, and I kind of treat it like bumpers on bowling is what I call it. So it's kind of just to nudge me back so I can go down the right path. But through some of those earlier sessions, I learned a lot about different coping strategies and methods, and I know what works for me. And a lot of it is like getting outside, seeing the sun, getting some exercise, talking to like my therapist. So I knew when we had the miscarriage, like this is what we've been training for. Like this is the worst thing that could ever happen. So I know there's no chance we could do it on our own. So I was just kind of not really grasping at straws, but like I was looking for help for someone outside to help guide us back down the path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like what you have control over, being the person who's not experiencing it with your body. And I think it's really amazing that you were able to like help bring in extra support, because we don't have to go through these things alone. And I wish everybody had that or had the ability to have therapy, because I know it's not accessible for everyone. But
yeah, I was lucky enough. The 3 therapists I was able to do through my work, I had access to this thing, an employee assistance program. And it's, I don't know, I guess it's outside of your insurance. It's just a separate benefit that some companies offer where you can get in touch with a therapist pretty quickly. So I did that. We also, I think through my work, had this fertility benefit, Carrot.
oh yeah,
But
I've worked with Carrot.
Oh wow, that's great.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think they were the most helpful. So yeah, that was another one we scheduled through. And
So they pay for mental health support related to birth and fertility?
I recall it being very like aligned with the pregnancy loss.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I think it was similar along that. It wasn't like a lot of I think we just had the one session with them, but
For the listeners, Carrot is like a add-on insurance supplement that some workplaces provide, and they do reimbursement for things related to perinatal period. So I think it covers like fertility treatments, and then also it can pay for postpartum doula support, which is why I've worked with them. But it's a nice step in the right direction for, getting people in the perinatal period more support.
That's great. I had no idea they did postpartum. That would have been very helpful. Yeah, and then I think the third one I think was just through my insurance. We work with Kaiser, that's our insurance provider, and they offer a grief counselor or something. So yeah, through those 3 different avenues, we were just trying to talk to somebody. And I don't know how beneficial it was in the long run, but just being able to like sit down and talk about it, and like you don't feel as closed in anymore when you start talking to other people. So it helps.
Had you known how common miscarriage was before it happened to you? And that's not to take away from how painful it is, but did you feel like after going through this experience and learning that other people experience this too, that it was helpful, or I don't know what the question is. Comforting? Yeah.
No.
People don't talk about it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, and people, only once it happens, people are like, oh, everyone knows someone who's gone through a pregnancy loss, it seems. And we've had multiple people, and like, it's nice. But yeah, not super helpful in the moment, because it felt like we were just on our own journey, I guess.
Yeah. So it's the opposite, even though it does happen to, what is the statistic?
I can't think of it.
It's like 1 in 3 or something like that. It's the opposite. You still feel pretty alone, because it is your own experience.
I think so. And I think the statistics are a little, I wouldn't say skewed, but like for those who have repeat miscarriages, I think the percentages tend to go up. I remember it was something we were like cognizant of during the pregnancy. So like, you go week by week and you see the percentages drop, and we were at like 11 weeks and we had no health risks and everything seemed to be going great. So like I was looking like our percentages, it was like, oh man, we're like 2%. Like there's no way. And then, you know, the worst thing happens and percentages, like nothing really helps. At that point, it's either like 50-50, like it either happens or it doesn't. So
Yeah.
But for anyone out there, like, yeah, there is a lot of people know people who have loss, and you got to talk about it, I guess, because that's really the only way I think we were able to process it.
Yeah, like statistics are maybe comforting to some people, but not at all to others when it's you that's the statistic.
Right.
Yeah.
It was comforting before it happened when I thought our chances were low. But then, yeah, at a certain point, you just kind of throw it out the window.
I feel like it can even make things worse if it's just 2% chance. Then it's just like, wow, really?
Yeah, and then you don't want to hear like, oh, 1 in 3 ends, because then we did have that thought when we were ready to get pregnant again. We were like, it felt like we had. I mean, you're never going to fully process the grief, but it felt like we were at a point where we could kind of live with it and continue our journey. And then so when we were ready to try again, you don't want to think about the 1 in 3. Like it kind of flips again when people are like, oh, it's so common, don't worry about it. And it's like, well, we still want to have a baby, so don't tell us that it's that common.
What's like the thing that people can do to help somebody who's gone through a miscarriage? Like what would you want to hear from other people?
Oh,
from family or friends?
Yeah, that's great. I've been trying to shout it from the rooftops. Either, you know, send food. That's always helpful. And even after birth, you know, food, I think, is the universal love language. But honestly, what I wanted to hear most from people was like, that sucks. Just acknowledging it. It seemed like most people were just like, I have no idea what to say. Like, I'm so sorry. There are no words. And it's like, there's some words. Like, just tell me it sucks. Like, it does suck. We can all agree.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a product of not talking about it. You know, there's so many people that go through it, yada, yada. And then, you know, it's almost, and we talked about this on our last episode too. Like, you know, they say don't tell anyone you're pregnant for however many weeks, because then if you have loss, then you don't have to like break it to people. But it's like, what if we talked about it more, at least to the point where it was just like, then family and friends, you know, it's not this like taboo thing where people are just like, oh, how do I respond to this? My friend's going through something, but like, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, it's like to avoid making other people uncomfortable.
And if people don't want to share for a certain amount of time because they don't want to have to break the news to people, that's also valid, of course. But even if just a few more people shared, I think it would be less taboo.
Yeah, that was one thing that was helpful. Like when we had to share the news, like that's the worst phone call you can make to your family. So we had to ask them to like tell other people too, because we just couldn't. That's too many phone calls to make.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How did you for yourself know that you were ready to try again? And how did you navigate that with Cailley?
So I don't think I don't think we knew we were ready. You just kind of have to trust yourself that you'll get through it and like you will be ready. It's a long journey, you know, it's 9 months. Like I think we had full confidence that after 9 months we can take the journey again. I don't know. I think just knowing like once we got through that first week and I wasn't, you know, crying in the shower anymore. Like it felt like it's something we can live with, but it did, I will say there's no silver lining, but it did like open up our communication a bit more. So that was really nice, because there would be times, it's such a weird thing how we can both, you know, experience the same event, but we don't feel the same feelings at the same times. So it comes in waves for each of us. And so like there would be these random days, like months into the pregnancy, where Cailley would be like, oh, you know, I was thinking about our first pregnancy, and I was like, man, like I haven't thought about our miscarriage in like a week. It helped open the communication a bit.
It can be hard, you know, with two people who are like the biggest support of each other, both going through such a big hardship, because then, you know, when one of you might need the support of the other one, you might not have that, the capacity to give that, and vice versa, especially when things are like back and forth on each side. It can be hard, but communication is key. So that's really great that it moved you guys forward in that way.
Yeah.
Did you honor the first pregnancy, the being that was there and is still there in a lot of ways in your hearts? Was there any ritual that you did together or anything to honor that for the two of you?
Yeah, there's so many great ideas out there, and I think it's just finding what resonates with you. It's funny, when we first experienced the loss, I was like, oh, like I don't want to be, not to throw shade. I'm like, I don't want to be like one of those weirdos who has a plaque on the mantle or an urn with their. As time went on, and like we did find we needed to like honor them, like you're saying, and so I ended up getting this. I think it's called a Jizo statue. It's like a Japanese figure, but I forget what it is, but it like represents the loss of children, and I think primarily, but also miscarriages, like, children before they're born, and like, guides them to heaven. And so we have a little statue on our coffee table. No one asks what it is, because it's a weird topic to discuss when you're at our house, but it's for us, and it's just nice to like, now we do have a beautiful life in our home, and we get to share that with our first.
Yeah.
That's really special.
When you think about, I guess it's like my own protective mechanism statistics, like to prepare, because I have not had a miscarriage, but then I'm always like, I'm like preparing for that still to happen. And so this comes from my own curiosity of, do you talk about your daughter, your living daughter, as the second child? Is it the second birth? How do you acknowledge through language this experience that you both went through?
That's a great question. And even my wife and I kind of express it differently, where like when we first had our second pregnancy, I don't know why, I think my brain was like trying to make sense of it all, but I was thinking like, like what if there is reincarnation? Like what if it's the same soul of the first pregnancy? And I think over time that belief has worn down, but I don't know, I kind of treat them as separate. I wouldn't call my daughter our second, because especially just telling people, I think that's a whole can of worms. And maybe if it gets a little more mainstream to talk about pregnancy loss, it wouldn't be so weird. But for the time being, there was a huge like identity crisis when we had the miscarriage, though, and then I'm just like, am I a father? Like, there's just a lot of questions you don't know.
Gosh, there's just so much suffering alone, and so much suffering because of what people would think or say, or if they saw the statue, what questions would they ask? And it's just making everything so invisible that you went through, you and Cailley.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it. In a way, though, I think it's kind of just like it's like a scar. Like, it's not invisible, but it's there just to remind us like what we went through. And I don't really need, at this point, anyone else to make sense of it. My wife and I have gone through it, and we're processing, and I mean, it's still ebbs and flows. So, there's a good metaphor where it's like, the waves of grief or whatever, and like they start big and strong, and then, they never really go away, but they kind of get a little less powerful and a little further apart.
Yeah.
So was there a certain point in the second pregnancy where you felt like you didn't have one foot in, one foot out? You felt like you could fully accept, okay, this is really happening this time?
Yeah, actually. So I think it was like our 8 or 9 week checkup. We wanted to limit ultrasounds just for our own personal opinions. But when Cailley was at the OB, and then they were going through the checkups, and they're like, oh, I noticed like you're spotting a little, like, would it be okay if we do an ultrasound? Like, heart drop, like we're like, yeah, do whatever. Like, of course. And like at that point, your convictions or beliefs kind of go out the window, and you're just like, just tell me my baby's safe. But yeah, and then they put in the ultrasound, you got to see the baby and see like the heart flicker and all that, and it's just really powerful.
Was that the first time you felt like you could connect? Because I know you mentioned like Cailley was experiencing all the things and you weren't able to. Was that being able to have a visual, was that helpful for you to connect? Sort
of. I think at that point, there's still not like, you can't really see a face. Yeah, that helped for sure. Make it real, I guess. But I think it had been coming and going in waves, and like, but yeah, I think at that moment you're like, all right, this is happening.
What was it like watching Cailley's body get bigger?
Very interesting. It didn't. Like, she was just one of those, I don't want to say annoying people, but she didn't show for so long. And It took a while. And then when she finally popped, I think I'd say it was almost like midway through the third trimester or something. So she hit it pretty well. It also helped that it was mostly through like winter. So a lot of heavy coats, and she sized up so she had room to grow. And that was the annoying part. Like no one stopped at the crosswalks for us to pass for the pregnant lady. Like, you can't see she's pregnant.
Just hold up a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. And we were pretty lucky. We just kept, going on our walks and being able to stay active. And I think even the day before Cailley's water broke, like she walked like 2 or 3 miles that day. And
Wow.
it was just our lifestyle. So
What was it like as the partner to prepare for this big birth experience that you just like, it's coming whether you want it to or not? I mean, of course you wanted to, but the difficulty of birth that, everyone is anticipating. What was it like for you to prepare for that?
So initially terrifying because my wife, she went off the deep end. She wanted a free birth. And I'm just like, that's cool. So like no doctor. I'm like, no. I'm like, okay. Like, give me time to think about it. And yeah, I think I came to a realization about myself that I am not the most level-headed under duress. So I'm like, the moment I see blood, I'm calling 911. Like, I wanted a hospital birth just so like I didn't have to make any decisions. She wanted a free birth, so we compromised and did a home birth with some midwives. And so that helped a lot. Cailley got more comfortable, and I saw my role more as like a supporting actor instead of the director.
Yeah, there's only so much control you have.
Yeah.
It's not like a directable situation.
And then, so in an attempt to try and like, bond, I don't know, maybe support my wife a little better, but I wanted to try and do the Bradley method of, what is it, childbirth coaching, which is a lot of partner-led coaching. And so I was ready, I was willing. I'm like, all right, I'll try and be the coach. And then it's nice knowing we have the midwives to fall back on. So we tried that. I've read all the books, and not all the books. I read a few books, bought a workbook, watched a lot of videos, and wasn't feeling super confident, but I'm like, all right, I can get my way through this. I'm ready. I know when to do hip squeezes and counter pressure and all that. But yeah, for those who haven't heard my wife's story, when she was going through labor, she had a very interesting labor. Her water broke at like 4:30 in the morning on a Sunday, and our midwives let it go like pretty long. They just dropped off a Doppler and called every like 4 hours to make sure the baby wasn't showing any signs of like an elevated heart rate, I think, any signs of infection, any of that. So they let it go for a while. And when my wife was finally in labor, I think it was like classic, 1 a.m. or something, she had been only like 1 to 3 centimeters dilated for a really long time. And our midwives were like just starting to talk about transferring us to the hospital, which my wife really didn't want. So she started like really struggling, and she's in a lot of pain, and she's like, oh, I feel like I have to push. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like, let's try, let's call your friend. Her friend is a delivery nurse out in Arizona. So like, we'll call her, we'll get a level head on this. And she's like, yeah, it doesn't sound like you're ready to push. Like you're talking to me on the phone. When she was having contractions, she was just like, oh, just give me a second. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not like, our midwives were like, all right, Ryan, you'll know when to call us, because she'll be like, oh, like, all right, yeah, that's not that. So I'm like, all right, we're not there yet. So I'm trying to do hip squeezes and counter pressure and, all the stages for that early stage of labor that the Bradley method shows. I had my workbook, and I'm trying to flip through that. And then we have our, we did a course that was like My Essential Birth. And they also had a workbook, and I was flipping through that, and I'm like, all right, early stage. I'll know when she's in transition because she'll want to give up.
Yeah. I want to stop and just give you some credit, because all of the ways that you prepared yourself to be supportive are amazing. And I know, you've said you didn't read all the books, you just read some, but like you did a lot. And I think that you really deserve credit for that because not everybody does that. Not every partner does that. And it's huge.
I've heard of stories of the supporting person, often male, watching football during
or sleeping.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to the sleeping. I know my wife still holds a grudge, but I want to set the record straight.
Well, everybody does deserve to rest, but you know.
And the supporting person needs support too.
Anyway, continue. Just wanted to give you some credit because it's really great.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it helped like me personally because I think we all want to feel like we have a job to do. As the non-birthing partner, it's very hard to find a job to do. I know if you ask my wife, I think she'd say the most helpful thing I did was get her water when she was pregnant. So I'm like, all right, I'm a water boy. That's all right.
What was that like to hear?
Well, I mean, it was kind of nice, like knowing that was my job, you know, whenever it was empty or whenever I thought she had that one of those like 40-ounce water bottles that weighed like 12 pounds. And I'm like, this is too heavy for you to lift. Let me. But yeah, it's the little things. It's just finding ways that you can help. I can't, take the pain for her or do any of that. So anything I could do, I think kind of gave me a sense of purpose during the pregnancy. And
If you could take the pain, if there was an ability, if you had the technology to do that somehow, or you could just go into her body, would you do it?
Yeah, honestly, I would, because I have no idea how she did it.
And this is where this first part of our conversation with Ryan ends. You can hear the rest of Ryan's birth story and other reflections on parenthood so far on Wednesday, September 18th, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you'll tune in next time. Bearing Birth is available on all major podcast streaming services. We invite you to subscribe as well as follow us on Instagram at Bearing Birth Podcast.